welcome back to Keto Guy Kitchen. Thank you so much for joining me here today. In today's video I want to cover a really interesting topic and something that I think has been discussed for quite a long time in the keto community. I want to talk about gluconeogenesis. For so long I was really worried about eating too much protein, and it wasn't until a few years ago that I looked properly into the mechanisms behind how the body uses protein on low carb that I realised that we have nothing to fear and so much to gain from eating good amounts of protein every day. And in fact it's so important for many reasons on the keto and low carb way of eating. So let's get going on this topic of gluconeogenesis. So let's begin with a definition. Gluconeogenesis essentially means the making of new glucose from the breakdown of compounds found in the body. Gluco is sugar, neo means new, and genesis means process or creation. So gluconeogenesis is the creation of new glucose from within the body. And this can be contrasted with glucose that we eat in our diet. So for instance, on a standard diet we're going to be eating high carbohydrates, pasta, rice, starchy vegetables like potatoes and peas, etc. When somebody is a sugar burner where they use glucose as their main source of energy, that glucose is used throughout the body. However, where fat is the preferred fuel by way of dietary fat and by ketones, the amount of glucose available for energy is far more limited. So are there any parts of the body which only use glucose for energy? There's the retinal neurons in the eye and the red blood cells, and also the brain, which needs a constant source of energy. The main molecules the body uses for gluconeogenesis are lactate. So lactate is it's a byproduct really from the muscles and the red blood cells. It also comes from triglycerides, that is stored fat, and from amino acids from protein. The body is reluctant to use amino acids as part of the process of gluconeogenesis, because those amino acids are vitally important for other uses in the body. So this is not an amount each day that we can weigh out and say, well, that's from a red blood cells and that's from a run later on. It doesn't work like that. Rather, the body balances and decides what it needs, the amount of glucose it needs and when it needs it. The body's always trying to keep things in a good balance. This is why gluconeogenesis is said to be demand driven, not supply driven. Is too much protein going to be turned into sugar? Is it like eating a piece of chocolate cake? Well, no, it's not. It's quite different to that. So why do people think it is turned into sugar? Well, I think it's because of the association between amino acids and insulin. The insulin is the hormone of storage, and when protein is ingested, it's broken down into amino acids, and some of those are sent to the muscle cells for muscular health and good muscle function, and we want that. We want our muscles to be functioning optimally. However, the way that the amino acids get into the cells, well, it needs the right key for that to happen, and this is where the role of insulin becomes so important. Of course, there has to be a point at where those cells have enough amino acids, and so the pancreas will release another hormone called glucagon, which indicates that the nutrients in the blood are back to a balanced level, and insulin has done its job of getting those amino acids into our cells, into our muscles. So the process ends. So eating protein, yes, it does stimulate insulin, but it also stimulates glucagon, which after a period of time dampens the effect of the insulin to ensure that the correct balance of nutrients is taken up by the cells and the right amount of nutrients remain in the bloodstream. Again, the body decides the balance. Quite different from the insulin spike that we see after eating a high carb meal. This is a much gentler release of insulin. So what about ketone levels? Will too much protein kick you out of ketosis? Well, no, it won't, although there is definitely a case for high amino acids, high amounts of amino acids to reduce the levels of ketones in the body. But that's not the same as putting a halt to ketosis altogether. The body still needs to burn fat for energy. So does protein affect ketone levels? Well, yes, in some people it can do, although the threshold will be different in everybody. So some people could eat a high amount of protein and see no difference in their ketones. Other people could eat a lower amount of protein and yes, they could see a reduction in their ketone levels. Well, isn't that a bad thing? You know, isn't it a bad thing because we're on a keto lifestyle, so it's bad to have fewer ketones? Remember, lower ketones does not mean no ketones. In an ideal world, I think eating twice a day is optimal, and including good amounts of protein at those meal times is so important so we can get the stimulus of the amino acids into the cells by the effect of insulin. And at other times, and ideally where we're not snacking between meals, the body will be producing ketones for energy, so the couple of times in the day when the body has lowered ketones, that is not a problem. And in fact, it's a positive and natural state for the body to function in. People who are on the keto way of eating for nutritional, dietary reasons like epilepsy, for instance. And for those people, they will need to reduce their protein levels. They will need to keep their protein levels between 10 and 20% of their dietary intake, but that's always decided and monitored by their doctors. However, for those people who are using keto as a weight loss tool or as an anti-inflammatory tool, as long as the carbs are kept low, and remember it's low carbs that induces ketones, it's not high fat. Although fat's very important, of course, it's very healing, and as long as the nutrition eaten is good sources of healthy proteins and fats, that is the best way to eat for optimal health. Is there any reason to eat carbohydrates? Well, you know what, this is a completely individual issue. For some people there may be other reasons that they want to include carbohydrates. Some people want to include fibre, which is very low carb. But if one of them is because we have been told we need to consume some glucose to fuel the brain, then that's incorrect. Gluconeogenesis is demand driven, not supply driven. So reducing the amount of protein you eat is not going to make any difference to the body making the glucose it needs. If you're on low carb or keto, your brain still needs a certain amount of glucose, as does your red blood cells and parts of your eye. So gluconeogenesis is going to happen. Remember that being in ketosis means that we are keeping insulin low most of the time, but we want insulin to be elevated from time to time in order to build muscle and to get certain enzymes into the cells to keep us healthy. Good muscle means good health. The very best, the healthiest, most effective way to allow insulin to do the jobs we want it to do without doing the additional task we'd rather it didn't do is to consume a good amount of protein a couple of times a day, because then insulin is raised for a short period of time, does its job, and then the body will release glucagon to turn off that insulin switch. We don't need to do anything else. Job done, task over, get on with other important things like focusing on the other tasks that we need to do to keep ourselves optimally healthy. Gluconeogenesis does reduce the levels of ketones in some people, but that's only temporary. I hope from this video you have taken away how important gluconeogenesis is, how important insulin is, and how important good amounts of protein are. And all three of those are needed for our optimal health. So that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me here today in my kitchen, in the Keto Gaia kitchen. Take care and bye for now.